All right, so we're caught up with the chat. Let us go into U.S. aid to Israel, and not just U.S. aid, but aid in general to Israel. Where is Israel getting its stuff from? Well, let's get into it. So this is actually a CFR, Council on Foreign Relations article, and I mean, as far as inside knowledge, this is about as inside as you can get. This is an influential think tank. So let's get into it. I just took I mean, as the title says in four charts, I just took the four charts. So, chart number one, Israel is the largest cumulative recipient of U.S. aid. So the gold bar is economic aid, and the red part of the bar is military aid. So this is total aid from 1946 to 2024, and the data from 2023 and 2024 are incomplete. But as you can see, interestingly, Egypt is number two there, and it gets almost as much economic aid as Israel gets, but Israel gets so much more military aid than any other country. So in order, it's Israel, Egypt, Afghanistan, South Vietnam, and then the UK. Actually got more economic aid than Israel, but only by a little bit, and India, same thing. But anyway, yes, Israel is by far the largest cumulative recipient of U.S. aid over that time period. And interesting how much they were funding South Vietnam. So, chart number two, the U.S. has provided significant military aid to Israel since the 1970s. So you can see a number of spikes in the amount of military aid that the Zionist project has received. So you got like 1974, huge spike over $12 billion. Late 70s too, like 1979, massive spike. Couple of minor spikes in the early 2000s, part of the global war on terror and such. So like invasion of Afghanistan and invasion of Iraq, basically, because you see like 2001, 2003, and then they do a breakout of missile defense there as well. But you can see there's another huge spike in the last couple of years. Preliminary amount for fiscal year 2024 is there on the right. That's $12.5 billion. I had some commenter trying to tell me, oh, Biden is giving all this money to Iran and blah, blah, blah. And I was like, yeah, no, that's not true. The U.S. has always been funding Israel to a massive extent. And, you know, they recently gave back some frozen funds to Iran, but that's not really the same because that was Iran's money in the first place. And they were like, no, Biden's giving all this money to Iran. I said, well, how much money are they giving them? And, you know, like you seem to be really upset about it. What is the actual amount? Surprisingly, or not, they didn't know. That's how it goes a lot of the time on the internet, doesn't it? But anyway, I said, you know, meanwhile, actually, Israel is the absolute top of the list. Iran, they're actually more interested in overthrowing the government than funding it. But, you know, don't listen to me. I've just got these charts. All right, chart number three, how Israel's imports of U.S. arms stack up. So Israel is not the largest importer of U.S. arms, but 78% of its imports have come from the United States. You can see there at the top, you know, over 3/4 of Israel's weapons come from the U.S., and then a little bit from other countries. And then you can see other countries that get weapons from the U.S., Egypt, Iraq, Kuwait, Qatar, Saudi Arabia, UAE. And the last chart, younger Americans are more critical of U.S. aid to Israel. Attitudes toward U.S. military aid to Israel in its war against Palestine, its genocidal war of conquest by age group. And so you can see there, the dark green is strongly favor, and the dark red is strongly oppose. And then the milder colors are somewhere in the middle. And so you can see there's like kind of an even split across the different sections. So strongly oppose is 19%, somewhat oppose is 16%, strongly favor is 17%, somewhat favor is 19%. That's like within a percentage point or two, like basically the same amount. And then neither favor nor oppose is 14%, right there in the middle, neutral. And then another 15% not sure. So you can see that the older somebody is, the age groups here are 18 to 29, 30 to 49, 50 to 64, and 65 and up. The percentage of people who said that they were not sure drops from 22% to 19% to 12%. And then the oldest people were the least likely to say that they were not sure at 8%. What we see in the 18 to 29 group is 29% strongly oppose, in contrast to the overall average of 19% strongly opposing. And then also 30 to 49-year-olds, 23% is above the average of strongly opposing. And the somewhat opposing is the same. For the youngest group, it's the same as the average, and for the 30 to 49, it's slightly above at 17% rather than 16%. And then the 50 to 64, you've got the same amount of somewhat oppose and slightly less strongly oppose at 14%. But yeah, so there's definitely an age component to this, of like people who got their ideas about what's going on in Palestine decades ago versus now, and people who are probably more in touch with the news via current social media. So that is something of an encouraging sign. The Zionists are really declaring war on the whole world at this point. Just the defiance is amazing. I don't know how they think that this is going to help them in the long run. It seems like they are really overplaying their hand in a really extreme way. But let's go in here also. We were talking about imports. In terms of arms, who supplies the most arms to Israel? We saw that they get most of their stuff from the U.S., but who else? Germany and Italy also give major amounts of weapons to Israel. Germany, 29.7%. And there was actually just something that I saw on social media where Germany knows that the Zionists are committing a Holocaust in Palestine, mass slaughter of people, including by fire, but not necessarily by fire. And they know that that's what's happening. And so they were trying to, one of the German media outlets revealed that the German government was trying to get the Zionists to sign something saying that they wouldn't use these weapons for a genocide. Like, who are you fooling? Anyway, that's weapons. But, as far as more general supplies, where does Israel get its other stuff, including food and building supplies and other stuff? So for several years now, the biggest source is China, 14%, followed by the United States, 11%. Then Germany, 7.7% of total imports. Switzerland, 6.6%. Turkey, 6.2%. So as far as, building the infrastructure of the occupation, for example, there was a Chinese company, I forget the name off the top of my head, that was building the Zionists a subway system. So one way that you can not be complicit in genocide and annexation and everything else that they are doing and are bent on doing, and that is all part of the plan of building Greater Israel, is don't help them build the infrastructure of the occupation project. So the most common defense I hear of China on this is, well, China just does business with everybody. But let's step back for a second. If you're just some random multipolarity chud, you're not a Marxist, I can excuse that kind of thinking. From a Marxist-Leninist perspective, and China, last time I checked, was still officially Marxist-Leninist, is just doing business a Marxist-Leninist principle? If you are ostensibly the leading revolutionary Marxist force in the world, should you be doing this? Well, here's an example of what could be done, and this is from Colombia. Petro. Colombia's Petro signs decree halting coal exports to Israel over war on Gaza. And this is recent. This is from August. Colombia's president, Gustavo Petro, signed a decree banning all coal exports to Israel to pressure Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu's government into putting an end to the war on Gaza. The decree, there we go, was published on the presidential website dated 14 August and comes as the Gaza death toll has surpassed 40,000. Colombia is one of the biggest fossil fuel suppliers to Israel, with Petro taking to social media on Sunday to clarify that he will no longer allow for thermal coal to be used for making Israeli bombs dropped on Palestinians. Quote, "Who said it is unconstitutional to stop exporting coal to Israel when Netanyahu has been prosecuted for crimes against humanity," he wrote, likely referring to the International Criminal Court's current deliberation on whether to issue an arrest warrant against the Israeli leader. That really shouldn't be a question, but, quote, "Since when does our Constitution allow the export of products that help a genocidal maniac kill tens of thousands of children? Does it seem so abnormal to you that in Colombia, a progressive president refuses to trade with genociders?" he continued. According to Bloomberg, the Colombian Miners Association has warned that due to the free trade agreement between the two nations, Colombia can't stop coal exports to Israel, and companies that produce it may consider taking action. In May, Petro... So when I was saying that the corporation's need for profit is going to trump like any outside issue, this is what we're talking about. Hey, we need to make money. We don't care if they're using it to kill kids. We need to make money. In May, Petro announced that Colombia would be severing its diplomatic relations with Israel, describing Netanyahu as genocidal. He has continued to criticize Israel for its assault on Gaza, which has leveled entire neighborhoods and destroyed the enclave's infrastructure. Petro told crowds at a May Day rally that the world could not accept, quote, "the extermination of an entire people," although it has multiple times in the past. But yeah, let's put a stop to that for sure. I can get on board with that. Adding that if Palestine dies, humanity dies, unquote. He announced that his country would be suspending coal exports to Israel in June as the relationship between the two countries soured. Taking to Twitter at the time, he said that the coal exports would only resume, quote, "when the genocide in Gaza stops." Okay. And again, maybe, they're going to resume at some point, so don't give them coal even after they stop. But he also posted a draft decree which said that coal exports would resume only if Israel adhered to orders by the International Court of Justice, which said that Israel must immediately stop the military assault in Rafah. He clarified that the ban would not affect goods that had already been authorized for shipment. Coal exports to Israel were worth more than $320 million in the first 8 months of last year, according to Colombia's National Statistics Department. Israel also imports over 50% of its coal from Colombia, the American Journal for Transportation states. Since the war on Gaza started, Colombia has not made any new military purchases from Israel. Previously, Colombia relied on Israel for military hardware, including intelligence equipment and fighter jets. So that's the end of the article. So I think it doesn't take like a ton of imagination to think about what could be done differently there. We were talking about this the other day. One of the things, and by the other day I mean yesterday in the last stream, is in the U.S. We've struggled with building a left in general, and then with social chauvinism, social imperialism, which is socialist in name, but actually not internationalist, not proletarian internationalist, but more bourgeois nationalist and supportive of imperialism in the past. Just to contrast here with a country refusing to send coal, and they're an important source of coal for Israel, with what's going on in the U.S., which is the Zionist project would not exist without the U.S. It's extremely important, critical for upholding that. But there was a lot of people talking a while back, a few weeks ago, about the labor strike. And here's a really unfortunate example. If you ever wanted to know what social chauvinism, social imperialism is about, this is a good example. The ILA will maintain their pledge to handle military cargo during the strike, and also passenger cruise ships will be unaffected by the October 1st strike. So ILA, the I Love America Union, that's just sad, will maintain its longstanding pledge to handle military cargo during the strike, and they'll also leave the cruise ships alone. I get the cruise ships part because, yes, you want to endear the average American to the cause of the unions as you work to build the labor unions back up from a century-long, the lowest point in membership in a very long time. And so, okay, don't piss off the people who book their cruise, but the military, really? The International Longshoremen's Association's 85,000 members will continue to honor its century-plus pledge to handle all military cargo, even if there's a coastwide strike beginning next Tuesday, October 1st. The union will also continue to work passenger cruise vessels. Quote, dating back to World War I, the ILA was always proud to note that ILA also means love America when it came to its no strike pledge and handling U.S. military cargo at all its ports, said ILA President Harold Daggett, who served in the U.S. Navy and saw combat duty during the Vietnam War. We continue our pledge to never let our brave American troops down for their valor and service. We will proudly continue to work all military shipments beyond October 1st, even if we are engaged in a strike. And they have a military fucking consultant. The ILA's military consultant, General Tim McHale, retired, weighed in on the no strike pledge. Quote, the U.S. government representatives I've been engaging with are very happy and satisfied with the ILA, who have always been there in tough situations and always successfully accomplished the mission. Our U.S. military knows that the ILA will conduct military loadout operations even if there is a strike. Now that is fucking cowardice. And that's the kind of thing, as we build up the labor movement and build militancy and build a communist presence, that we're going to have to combat. Because proletarian internationalism and a revolutionary outlook is not compatible with this kind of thing. So, these are things that the U.S. left needs to have on its radar as we continue to grow in numbers and influence. And when you hear self-styled leftists speaking, this kind of trash, you got to step in and exercise some persuasion and pushback. But anyway, another thing that we talked about for a lot of the stream yesterday was the Green Party. As a potential mass left party in the U.S., which is sorely needed, we really don't have a mass left party. We just talked about this for like 3 hours yesterday. But basically, nothing is possible within the imperialist 1% controlled Democratic Party. If Bernie Sanders had the slightest amount of spine, he basically stole the Green Party's platform in the first place and then even watered it down a little. If he had any spine, he would have said, well, the Democrats predictably fucked us over, and now I'm directing the tens of millions of people who contributed to this campaign and showed up by the stadium full to support it and, did the phone call lists and everything else, knocked on doors. We're going to all join the Green Party en masse, and we're going to make it into the mass left party that this country needs. And yeah, would it have been, more social democratic than communist? Absolutely. Is that probably the most realistic forward step at one time for the U.S. right now? Yes. And it also really needs to happen. The vanguard is a relative term. The vanguard is the most class-conscious portion of the working class movement. And weak struggle begets a weak vanguard. And we have weak struggle. We have, weak organization. Will a mass party serve as the sole, future revolutionary vehicle? No. But the mass party and the vanguard party, these are different concepts. Vanguard party requiring study, requiring much more commitment, requiring much more militancy, requiring democratic centralist operations. Most people aren't going to join something like that, but they can get involved in something that will be productive and will get people, doing more independent proletarian class organizing and develop more of an independent proletarian class perspective and build class consciousness, which is the most important thing right now. Building class consciousness, intensifying the struggle at all levels. And you need to organize outside of the Democratic Party to really do that at all effectively. Green Party currently is a very weak vehicle. It's a poorly defined thing. But as of right now, there's an election in just a few weeks. There are candidates on the ballot, and there's PSL is on the ballot also. They do style themselves as more of a vanguard party, although they do the, as we were talking about yesterday, the Green Party, not very theoretically advanced. PSL comparatively much more theoretically advanced. However, they do the multipolarity thing, the Russia-China thing, revisionist. I know that they know better. There's older articles on their website from just the 2000s talking about how capitalist restoration was well along its way, even at that time in China, and that it, almost certainly would be completed openly in full at some point. Yet today they're still saying that like China's socialist. Not just that we don't want the U.S. to imperialize China. Of course, I mean, no one wants that. We want socialism. But, also saying that things are socialist that aren't is there's another discussion that needs to, there's another discussion that needs to happen there. Also, some of the ways that they try to shut down that discussion of like, well, foreigners can't possibly understand. No, I'm sorry, fuck you. That's liberalism. People who study Marxism and have access to economic data can make that analysis. That's how that works. And you have something to hide, frankly, if you're trying to say, like, foreigners can't possibly judge if we're following a Marxist-Leninist program. Really? How do you figure that one? But anyway, so there is an anti-Gaza genocide option on the ballot. I would suggest people take it for now. There's a lot of problems with the Green Party, which we've talked about, which I think partly result from it being so fringe. There's so few people who are actually involved in it that weird and bad ideas kind of spread easily in it because there's not sort of mass amounts of people pushing back on them. You get these kind of social media echo chambers. You get real people in real life, and they just look at you like, what? No, we're not doing that. And they vote against whatever fucking weird fringe thing it is. So, there's a lot of problems there. I mean, for example, Butch Ware just ran into the vice presidential candidate, who they just kind of plucked out of academia. The guy, in my opinion, is totally unprepared for any kind of political life. He was mentioning the Uyghur thing in China in the same sentence as Palestine. Unnecessary, unforced error. That is a very contentious thing, especially on Twitter. But he did mention it, and then when people started pushing back, which if you mention that on Twitter, you gotta know is gonna happen unless you're completely out of touch, he started turning comments off. So then he turned comments off on the next, half a dozen posts that he made after that. And, up to the present, basically, he hadn't posted anything that didn't have comments turned off. And it was just like, you're running for vice president of the United States. This isn't some private account. And it just makes you look incredibly weak and unprepared for political life if literally at the first roadblock, the first bump in the road, you're just turning off comments and not even like attempting to dialogue with people. Even if you think that they're wrong, you have to like engage with that. You're running for vice president. It's ridiculous. So I was tweeting quite a bit about that. And tweeting at the Green Party like, hey, fix this now. You're losing credibility by the minute here. And yeah, it would be nice to get that 5%, the fabled 5% that the Greens are always looking for. They have had actually pretty good messaging on the Gaza genocide, which we're going to read now. So this is from October 7, 1 year of war and genocide, generations of oppression. And this is written by Jill Stein. I think that the Green Party is going to have to do a lot better than Jill Stein and Butch Ware. But again, we need a labor movement going. Labor movements typically will produce socialist leaders, people who have actually been in the struggle and led the struggle, not just like random people on a book tour, academics and the Cornell West types, not the talking heads, but like people who have been involved. Actually, somebody I respect, as far as I know, is a multiple-time former Green Party vice presidential candidate, Sherry Honkala. She's been involved with like the Poor People's Campaign and other like anti-homelessness campaigns in Philadelphia. As far as I can tell, like that's legitimate activism involved in some kind of real-world struggle. And those are the kinds of leaders that you want to see emerging in the socialist movement. But again, there's not enough people involved. So for all the people sitting on the sidelines thinking that they're like building the left by just tweeting. You're really not. There's a much higher level of involvement required. And I still intend to vote Green personally this election, despite the obvious fucking ridiculous flaws with the Sign Where campaign, because it is a vote against genocide, actually. And I know we need to do much better in the long term. This is what we have for the moment. I'll take it, recognizing that it is a weak and flawed instrument, but, I'll take it for the moment. But the left has to get serious, and this was what we talked about for 3 hours yesterday, has to get serious about building a thing and not just sitting back and being, armchair critics online. You have to get involved in what's going on in your community because, yeah, there's an election once a year, every 2 years, every 4 years, depending on the office. But there's day-to-day community organizing that can happen through a Green Party or through organizations and associations that are affiliated with it or attached to it or that have membership overlap. And you'll meet those people and you'll learn those campaigns, and those campaigns will get amplified by its affiliation with some kind of a mass left party. Ultimately, populism is not going to end capitalism, etc. But as the U.S. left kind of gropes its way towards some kind of relevancy in national and international political life, we got to take it, I guess, step by step. And so do what you can. We know that there's tens of millions of people who supported Bernie. Why are those tens of millions of people not in the obvious choice of the Green Party? And there's a million excuses and half-assed reasons for that has to be overcome. It just has to be overcome. What else are you planning to do? Because if it involves the Democratic Party, stop right there. It's not going to get you anywhere. All right, let's read this piece. Today, October 7, 2024, marks 1 year since the Hamas attack on Israel that many consider to have sparked Israel's U.S.-backed genocidal campaign against Gaza that is now exploding into a regional war. But history did not begin on October 7, 2023. To understand the current situation, we must look back at least as far as 1948 to the Nakba, the brutal mass expulsion of indigenous Palestinians from their homes by Zionist paramilitaries, and the newly formed State of Israel. While the world has been watching in horror for the past year as this genocidal rampage has cut short hundreds of thousands of innocent lives, that 1 year was preceded by generations of violence, occupation, displacement, dispossession, apartheid, and ethnic cleansing. While we abhor violence, we must understand that settler colonialism, occupation, genocide, and all forms of oppression have always provoked resistance. If we merely condemn violence, quote, on all sides, without first acknowledging the underlying conditions of oppression and doing everything we can to rectify those conditions, we would not only fail to address the root causes of the problem, but would risk becoming complicit in injustice by drawing a false equivalency between oppressor and oppressed. As Desmond Tutu observed, if you are neutral in situations of injustice, you have chosen the side of the oppressor. One of history's greatest nonviolent changemakers, Dr. Martin Luther King Jr., identified the, quote, great stumbling block in the stride toward freedom as, quote, the white moderate who is more devoted to order than to justice, and who, quote, prefers a negative peace, which is the absence of tension, to a positive peace, which is the presence of justice. For too long, the U.S. government has supported Israel's version of order and peace, both in quotes, that demands the systematic subjugation of Palestinians to violent injustice. I like to call this violent peace. Obviously, contradiction in terms because it's not peace. But whenever people are denied their human rights, resistance is inevitable. Even President Kennedy recognized this with his statement that those who make peaceful revolution impossible will make violent revolution inevitable. Dr. King also recognized the hypocrisy and uselessness of condemning the violence of the oppressed without first addressing the violence of oppression. Quote, I knew that I could never again raise my voice against the violence of the oppressed in the ghettos without having first spoken clearly to the greatest purveyor of violence in the world today, my own government. The U.S. government is fully complicit in the violence that Israel has inflicted on the Palestinians and others, after supplying Israel with over $150 billion in military aid and shielding Israel from accountability to the international community for its long history of defying international law. For Americans to condemn the Palestinian resistance while our own government actively oppresses the Palestinian people would be neither just nor conducive to peace. Yeah, I mean, the people in the imperialist countries have to build a movement across borders, not just against their own bourgeoisie, their own capitalist class, but with we have to build bridges to the people in the imperialized countries, because that's another source of the power of the capitalists. The events of October 7, 2023 have been weaponized to justify the genocide of Palestinians. Yet it has become clear that official counts of October 7th have not only been divorced from the historical context, but factually distorted to serve the agenda of the Zionist Israeli government. As one example, Australia's ABC News reported in September that Israeli forces apparently applied the Hannibal Directive on October 7th, killing an untold number of their own civilians in attempts to prevent them from being taken hostage. That's one way to do that. The official discourse on hostages has also been extremely one-sided, rarely if ever mentioning that thousands of Palestinians are held prisoner by Israel without charge. From the Hannibal Directive killings to Netanyahu's disregard for the families of Israeli hostages to Israel's expansion of the war far beyond Gaza, it is clear that the Israeli government has not acted out of concern for hostages, but has only used those concerns as justification to launch a preconceived agenda of conquest and genocide. In just the last few weeks, the situation has gotten even worse. In a massive escalation of its genocidal war on Gaza, Israel has invaded Lebanon. Shortly thereafter, Iran launched a barrage of missiles at Tel Aviv in response to Israel's attacks on Lebanon, Syria, Yemen, Palestine, and Iran itself, raising fears of an ever-expanding war in the Middle East that could even spark World War III, nuclear war, or both. And I'll just add there, when Iran counterattacked, they did not hit civilian targets. They were hitting infrastructure and military targets. That's what they were hitting. So very much counter to the Zionist terrorist war on civilian populations. That is not what Iran did in response. If he wanted to, President Biden could stop this war with one phone call to the Israeli Prime Minister, as Ronald Reagan did in 1982. Israel's war machine is completely dependent on U.S. taxpayer-supplied weapons, money, military, and diplomatic support. But instead, the Biden-Harris administration is complicit in Netanyahu's plans to expand this horrific war. A recent Politico article titled, "U.S. Officials Quietly Backed Israel's Push Against Hezbollah," revealed that top Biden advisors actually encouraged Israel to invade Lebanon, despite the Democrats' claims that Kamala Harris is, quote, working tirelessly for a ceasefire. Man, she must be really tired, because it's been a super long time. We do not consent to being dragged into World War III by Netanyahu to support his genocidal land grab in Palestine, Lebanon, and beyond. By allowing Netanyahu to essentially dictate U.S. foreign policy, Biden and Harris have abdicated the responsibility of their office. As president, the first thing I will do is make the phone call to stop this madness at once and fix the crisis at its source by ceasing all support to Israel until it ends its genocide in Gaza and agrees to negotiate a settlement for Palestine and the region consistent with international law and the rulings of the International Court of Justice. So pausing there, that is a bit vague and maybe not an ideal position that we would like to see. I will definitely take it over what's happening now for the moment. Anyway, continuing. The U.S., as the primary backer of Netanyahu's military campaigns, holds the power to end his assault on Gaza and bring him to account. This is not a matter of diplomacy, but of the U.S. electorate exercising its responsibility by voting for leaders with the political will to act. As voters in the most powerful nation on earth, we bear a unique obligation to hold our government and its allies accountable. By holding Israel accountable, the U.S. can rejoin the international community from which we have become increasingly isolated due to our government's unconditional support for Israel's defiance of international law. Now, I'll say that this is getting a bit like pie in the sky here, but I mean, it's gone far beyond that. I don't think this is going to really fix that, and the problem has, I think, much deeper roots than, a Netanyahu or something like that. But, again, contrast this with the Democrats, who are just basically openly stating they're going to take what's happening now and extend it or expand it. This is at least a statement in the opposite direction, if a tad vague and naive. Anyway, when the United Nations considered membership for Palestine this year, 143 nations voted in favor and only 9 against, including the US and Israel. But the US has consistently used its veto power to shield Israel from accountability, undermining any credibility our nation has to speak on issues of international law and human rights. And again, the Zionism thing is a prominent point in, how the US doesn't respect human rights, but there are many, many other points as well. As a Jew who grew up just after the Holocaust, with relatives who fled pogroms and a grandfather named Israel, I take never again seriously, and that means never again for anyone. In just the last year, I've met thousands of people from all walks of life, including Muslims, Jews, Christians, Palestinians, Israelis, Arabs, and many others from many ethnic, religious, and spiritual backgrounds. And I can say with certainty from my personal experience that peace and friendship are possible. We can put an end to war, genocide, and generations of oppression and start a new path to a world of peace, justice, and human rights for all. In solidarity and gratitude, Jill Stein. So that's a statement from Jill Stein. Contrast that with Kamala Harris or Donald Trump. I think the choice there is very, very clear. Whatever criticisms, and a lot of people listening to this are communists. We would have a lot of criticisms of the Green Party, which again is not trying to be a vanguard party, but I mean, even as a mass party, I think there's a lot of ways that you could tighten up the Green Party substantially, and we should, and more communists should get involved in that. There does need to be a vehicle for tens of millions of the advanced masses to get involved in. And then, yes, also have your vanguard party, but also organize the advanced masses. Absolutely. And, we should not abdicate the Green Party to just the populists and the contrarians and the covert libertarians and all the other problems that are present in that party. But I have to say, I get a little choked up after watching, a full year now of absolutely devastating news at very high daily intensity. Just reading a statement like that of somebody, putting forward an actual vision of peace, however sort of, somewhat vague in this case, or at least in this particular statement. But it's so sad. It's outrageous, and it also should spur us to righteous anger. At the same time, it's also deeply sad, and it's just, what kind of world could we have that would be much, much better than this? And how many people in this country are just not doing the bare fucking minimum? As we were talking about yesterday, I've been personally going out of my mind for the last 25 years, roughly, trying to do whatever I can. And it's there's a reason that the wake up slogan gets used so much. It's people are fucking sleepwalking. Anyway, we still have, we're going to stay on the subject of the Greens and sort of what does the U.S. left do at this point. Again, to me, you have the obvious skeleton of a mass party. It just needs some meat on its bones, and then it needs to be tightened up and, have its ideology and theory develop better. But you have the skeleton of it right there. Meanwhile, people continue to pour so much money, time, and effort into the Democratic Party. That will get you nowhere, and it's just been proved time and time again. Meanwhile, Green Party continues to languish for lack of involvement. As we said in the last stream, the Green Party doesn't come out of a can. You don't put coins in a vending machine and press some buttons. You have to build it. It is made by people who show up to the meetings and who volunteer their time and who offer to run as candidates and do all the other stuff involved in the day-to-day operations of the party. They don't have corporate money. They don't have PAC money. It's just literally made by the people who show up. And if nobody shows up, there's no party. Sometimes people are I have an outdated Facebook page as my state's Green Party. You know why? Because nobody showed up to fucking run it for the last few years. So this needs to change on a permanent, lasting, ongoing basis. That people just drop in and out, and it just can't be, you can't build a political movement on that basis. So anyway, let's go to the chat for a minute, and then we will do our video, which is also going to be on this topic of, we're going to look at some Democrats trying to trash the Green Party. Can Israel literally not manufacture their own weapons? It seems stupid that a war economy can't even make their own weapons. I know they do a lot of high tech stuff. I don't know. And didn't they invent the Uzi? Yeah, I don't know what their weapons production capacity is. Older generations are always talking about Yasser Arafat and remember some of the old terror attacks, like the Olympics attack. At least they were at the beginning, like that was a justification. Yeah, it's a very different era, particularly since 2006, 2007. Things have changed dramatically since then, too. I mean, but really after the 90s, after the USSR stopped existing, because, and we've covered this in the past, too, China, after the capitalist roaders took over in the late 70s, for fear of offending their international investors, dramatically reduced their amount of support for national liberation and socialist movements around the world, which actually a revolutionary Marxist country, that's like sort of your bread and butter, is giving, revolutionary aid and assistance and solidarity to those types of movements. That dropped way off because they started building up Chinese capitalism. But then the USSR, even as degraded as it was, and as sort of self-serving and USSR-centric as it was, they were funding these movements a lot more. And then when they ceased to exist in the early 90s, you had nobody really giving major material aid to the resistance movements, and they got taken over. The left secular elements started to decline dramatically, and you got more of the sort of right-wing jihadis taken over. So about the imports chart, I looked at that graph before. Is it still up to date? It lists the year as 2022. Not that it excuses China's support over the years. They should have known better. So the reason that the last year shown as 2022 is that's the last complete year. But yes, according to more recent press releases, China was still, it's been the top source of imports since like 2021 or something like that. And yes, all the numbers that are in, even for the incomplete data of 2023 and 2024, do still show China as the leading source of imports for the Zionist project. China isn't Marxist-Leninist anymore. Well, officially, according to them, they are. So, I mean, you could look at them and say, according to what they're doing, they're not following any of the basic things of Marxism-Leninism. And if Lenin were still alive, he would rip them a new one. But according to them, I believe their official state ideology is still Marxism-Leninism. And I'm not supporting that. What I'm saying is, if you're going to go out there and say, yeah, we do Marxism-Leninism, then fucking do it. And, there's sort of a lot of mental gymnastics on the part of people who are trying to twist what they see out of China as being somehow consistent with that. What Colombia is doing is like how they stopped apartheid in South Africa. It's the key way to stop them again, crush the Zionist economy. Absolutely. If they can't get a majority of the coal that they used to get, if they can't get the stuff that they need to run the occupation, then they can't do the occupation. It's utter common sense. If you and I can figure that out, the world's leading revolutionary Marxist-Leninist party and government can figure that out. I don't expect much from the guys who supported the Mujahideen or Khmer Rouge, referring to China, yeah. I think the problem is also if China stopped exporting to Israel, they would still sell to the USA, which would then sell it to Israel at no markup. Then let them do that. But, you do what's within your power. But until you're doing what's within your power, you can't really say you're doing all you can. When it comes to the military equipment the Zionists received from the American Empire, increasingly think potentially the only way to stop that, short of a revolution, would be to literally destroy the factories producing those weapons. I also have a feeling that if that happened, martial law would almost certainly go into effect. You better believe it. But, hey, how about a big strike blocking those weapon shipments? Well, that's why I read the ILA article, because you've got these unions jerking off the military-industrial complex and being directly complicit in imperialism. And so you need to have an anti-militarism, element, a proletarian internationalist revolutionary element in your union organizing and your strike strategies. You can't be doing this like social patriotism garbage. That's a thing that the struggle for communist influence in the labor unions has always embraced. Lenin wrote about it. This was also like key in the 21 conditions to join the Comintern. Your party had to be engaged in struggle in the cooperative societies, in the labor unions, etc., for a proletarian internationalist position in day-to-day practice and votes and strategies and tactics. So this is like how you bring that to the organizations that are engaged in some kind of struggle, to the workers' organizations. I would love to see at least one time in my life a non-imperialist, non-bourgeois party take power and show what's possible. It's in our grasp, but man, trying to whip the U.S. left into action is difficult. Between the fear, the despair, the hopelessness, the learned helplessness, there's and just the actually ingrained, social imperialism, like genuine chauvinism. There's a lot to overcome, but we can do it. You and I are here. It can be done. A lot of people just don't know how big you have to think. And that's why we're trying to help people learn more about the 175-year history of the international communist movement, because you got to think really big to be a communist. You do have to do some study. You don't have to be like an ultra academic, but you got to read couple dozen books at least. You got to know your shit, because otherwise you're going to just accidentally be a liberal. You'll want to not be a liberal, but you won't be able to think big enough. And it really, really helps. Don't reinvent the wheel. Don't waste time. Just study. Go to the channel on the home tab at Socialism for All, youtube.com/Socialism for All. Go to the home tab. Scroll down. One of the first things you'll see is recommended reading lists and party syllabi. So there's a bunch of stuff there with fundamentals, the basic Marxism-Leninism study guide, the recommended reading lists of a bunch of different communist parties. Read those. There's a lot of overlap between them. So certain times you will see things more than once that are considered fundamentals, like socialism, scientific and utopian, or utopian and scientific, state and revolution, proletarian revolution and the renegade Kautsky, wage, labor, and capital, value, price, and profit, anti-Düring. There's certain things that are going to show up in multiple lists because they're really fundamental. Even just reading those will save you so much fucking time. It'll get you off the Jimmy Dore shit. It'll get you off of this sort of mindless contrarianism, going in circles. As I said, the U.S. left is groping its way toward relevancy. We can shine a light on that and be a beacon and really help that process along. And really just reading like a couple dozen books, or like even just hour-long pamphlets, it just will save you so much time and make so many things so much clearer. You will learn to think in terms of dialectical materialism. You'll learn more about the basic struggles that any left movement has. For example, in the RSDLP, the Russian Social Democratic Labor Party, which was the precursor to the CPSU, Communist Party of the Soviet Union. Back before the revolution, when Lenin was in the communist wing fighting the reformist social democratic wing, just read those things, because it's like you have had these conversations before with other leftists on social media. You've seen these things before. There's a thing from the 30s where Stalin is interviewed by H.G. Wells, the science fiction author. And H.G. Wells is more of like a reformist, Fabian socialist, like kind of like a gradualist. And Stalin obviously is a communist. And you've had this conversation before with some liberal somewhere that thinks that they're on the left. And there's a hilarious line in there where Wells is like, I actually think I'm to the left of you, Mr. Stalin. And you just can't help but feel kind of sad for him. But really, like, hook into this stuff. It will bolster your morale, and you'll just get the size of it, the size and shape of the overall left struggle, the struggle to build a proletarian party and build class consciousness and an independent proletarian perspective. You know, this is not the first time this is happening in history that people have had to go, which do I pick? Anarchism, social democracy, communism? This is not the first time. You know, anarchism was around when Marx and Engels were getting started in the 1840s. Okay, there's a lot of commentary on it. You don't have to try to invent it all yourself. Go back and read these things. In fact, if you are on the left at all, if you're passionate about these things, I know a lot of people are that haven't done the reading yet. If you're passionate about these things, you will love it. You will love reading theory and history. And on the channel, we've done hundreds of audio. We've done over 400 audiobooks. You'll love them. The reason I do it, it's fucking fascinating. And as somebody who has been looking for this kind of social change for a long time, it actually tells you how to do it. You see the roadmap of where was the left actually successful enough that they took power. You know, they overcame all the internal stuff, and then they overcame the external stuff. It's amazing. You will love it. You will love theory and history. It's not dry. I mean, certain things are dry, but a lot of, like, you know, the stories of Lenin's struggles within the RSDLP against the reformists, it's amazingly interesting. Many other countries have similar things as well, but you'll love it. Like, don't resist, you know, studying theory and history. If you're on the left, it will resonate with you. And we're going to thank the patrons as well for their contributions. If you would like to get your name on the screen like these fine folks, patreon.com/socialismforall or buymeacoffee.com/socialismforall. Every donation is encouraging. They're also materially helpful, and I've been able to spend a lot more time on this channel, as evidenced by the last 2 days. For example, because of the support, and I spend more time reading and planning playlists and conducting, you know, scouring for research and trying to tie things together, trying to keep my pulse on what's going on out there in the news and on people's minds, and so on, and keep doing something that is somewhat relevant and helpful for people. I love hearing from you all, whether you're contributing money or not. People send in many other contributions of stories and links and interesting questions and other lines of thought. So shout out to all of the contributors in all the forums. And yeah, we're going to call it there for today. And thanks to the patience, I was going to thank the patrons again, and why not? But thanks to the patience of the people who showed up for the stream today, and for all of your contributions, because you helped to make these streams what they are. It's just not the same versus me just, you know, being up there talking. I can just talk myself and just do a monologue, but much more interesting for what you all bring to this. Thanks again, and we'll see you in the next video.